March will be a Medea family funeral.
But I haven't seen any of the other ones. I'll be lost.
Yeah, I guess you have some movies to watch before March.
Fuck that. Welcome, nerds, to another episode of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast, a weekly nerd culture podcast that discusses the culture through various segments. You can find all of our content on our website, thenerdspodcast.com, including our YouTube channel, which, of course, you can find on YouTube as well. It is the Nerds You're Looking For, obviously. You can also check out our letterbox feeds on our website. My letterbox is at the Nerds Podcast, and my co-host is at that Tyler Hunt. Also on our website, you can check out any star rating we've ever given any film that we formally reviewed on this podcast by clicking on the Nerds Review tab. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, that Tyler Hunt. How's it going, man?
I am doing pretty well, man. How are you?
I'm good. I was actually a little worried about you because we got a lot of snow. I didn't know how Cleveland got hit, but I was worried because I didn't see you participate in the Facebook "How Hard Did Age Hit You" challenge that everybody's doing. So I thought that maybe you weren't with us anymore.
No, I just don't give a fuck, actually. I did think I almost... It's one of those things every once in a while, because, I mean, it's no secret that you do most of our social media posting. Every once in a while, you'll post something where I actually want to like it because it's good. And you doing the "How Hard Did Age Hit You" with our logo was pretty funny. I thought it was a nice troll.
I thought about doing it like on my own personal, and I was like, this is stupid, because I think my first profile pic was like the only picture I had on Facebook, which was there was a picture of me and my good friend Dustin at prom dancing together, and everybody in our high school thought that was hilarious that we danced together at prom. And so that was my profile pic because it was like the only picture that anybody had tagged me on Facebook, like when it first came out in like 2005. And so I was like, well, that's kind of stupid. You can't even see me in that picture. So I was just like, whatever, I'll just do it on our podcast because that'll be funny. And yeah, I was pretty happy with myself. Like I patted myself on the back pretty hard.
Yeah, man, it was good. So I give you props for that.
So how's it been? I know you probably got hit with snow as well, but I think Cleveland's probably a little bit better prepared for snow than Evansville is.
Yeah, I mean, we got hit earlier this week, so we got hit Wednesday, and like they immediately have the roads cleared off, and then we got hit last night as well, and I guess maybe because it was a Saturday night going into Sunday, they were a little slower to get the roads cleared off because my wife and I had gone out. We went to one of her friend's house for a game night. So luckily they live kind of close and I have a Jeep. So, I mean, the roads were kind of garbage. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like a completely different culture up here compared to Indiana when it comes to snow. I mean, I'm still connected to everybody back home, obviously, through like Facebook and stuff. And all I see are pictures of the roads and how bad the snow is. And everybody's acting like it's some weird miracle that this white stuff fell from the sky, even though it happens every fucking year. And then up here, nobody even talks about it. Like, you're not expected to miss things because the roads suck. Like, it's just part of life up here. You still have to get where you're going, and there's no exceptions. So it's just a completely different culture.
Oh, yeah. So I think we got like 4 to 5 inches Friday night going into Saturday morning. And like we were checking on it because I always go to movies on Friday night, and it was supposed to get really bad. I was going to go see Replicas, and then I was going to do my first Facebook Live movie review of that movie, which I think it's currently like 14% on Rotten Tomatoes. So I would have had fun trashing that movie because it sounds like it was pretty bad. But I didn't get to go to it because it was supposed to get really bad while I was in the movie. And I just, Keanu Reeves' January release is not something that I necessarily want to risk sliding off the road because the roads just don't get plowed and taken care of like they do. Well, at least what it sounds like they do in Cleveland. So yeah, it's completely different. we kind of hung out. My wife and I watched a couple of Lord of the Rings movies and then just kind of chilled, and we were watching it as it kind of came down. And I mean, for Evansville standards, it did snow quite a lot, but then Saturday afternoon I went out and ran some errands and it wasn't a big deal. They actually did a pretty good job getting it cleared, and then literally if you look out my window right now, you can't even tell that it snowed because it warmed up enough and it rained a little bit for it to all melt away. So everybody freaked out as per usual for no reason whatsoever.
I have a random question, and it's honestly not even connected to anything that you said, except for I kind of had a parallel with my wife. So Friday night, my wife and I also wanted to watch a movie, and where you guys watched Lord of the Rings, we were going to do the Black Mirror Bandersnatch. Have you done it yet?
No, I really want to, and my wife kind of watched a little bit of Black Mirror. I haven't watched any of it. So we were going to kind of watch it together, and I thought that would be kind of a fun thing for us to do, kind of pick what we want to kind of choose your own adventure type of thing, but we just haven't done it yet.
Yeah, so the reason I bring it up is we went to do it, and apparently you can't do it on an Apple TV. You have to do it on either a smart TV, like the Netflix app on a smart TV, or a game console. And I don't know if it's because you need more buttons on your remote or what, but I was pretty pissed off. Like, it's there on Netflix, on the Apple TV, and it's not till you click on it that there's like this trailer saying, fuck you, you can't do this. You're going to have to do it on a different device. But yeah, I was pretty ticked off.
But let's be honest. So this is only going to affect, or at least only like a 10% of our listener base is going to understand this. But let's be honest, that controller they give you with the Apple TV sucks so many balls. I hate that controller so much.
So Brittany, my wife, got me a 4K Apple TV for Christmas, and it's a different controller from the old silver one. So the new controller I actually like. You can adjust the volume on your TV with it, so you don't have to like fuck around with multiple controllers. There's like a touchpad where you navigate the screen. That's pretty cool. So, and then there's a microphone button so that you can talk to Siri and have Siri pull shit up for you. So I like the new controller, but I guess it's still not good enough for Bandersnatch in some way.
Yeah, but I thought you had your Xbox out in your living room. Have you moved it already?
No, for me, it's such a pain in the ass to fire up my Xbox and go to Netflix whenever I everything I do and I watch on my TV is through my Apple TV. So, it's definitely a first world problem. I could easily just
I was
fire
literally
going
to wait until you were done talking. I was just going to be like, hashtag first world problems.
So what do you watch your Netflix through?
I watch it through my TV. I have a smart TV. When I got the 4K, I went ahead and got a smart TV, and so we watch it normally through there. But it's weird. Again, hashtag first world problems. Like that TV, because it's a Samsung, only has certain apps like you can download on that TV. So we do have to watch some things on Apple TV. We have to watch some things on my Xbox. It just depends on what we want to watch, like what service we want to use, because we have a bunch of them, because we can't watch all of them on our TV.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I'm dealing with at this point. So yeah, I mean, not the end of the world. I can still watch it on a different device, but it was just it pissed me off in the moment. So it was surprising to me.
So I'm guessing you didn't actually watch it.
No, that's actually what I was going to be into. And so Friday night I ended up going to see a different movie, which is what I'm going to be into. If you're ready to dive in.
All right, yeah. So what were you into this week?
I went and saw Bumblebee.
All right.
And it was almost just to spite you for the shit that I got, which I'm going to get into. So Bumblebee is, of course, the Transformers spinoff that stars Haley Steinfeld and John Cena. It was directed by Travis Knight, who I didn't realize it. He actually did Kubo and the Two Strings, Paranorman, and Box Trolls. So I'm surprised. As much as you railed against this movie, like with him having done Kubo on the Two Strings, I know that's something that you liked quite a bit. I'm surprised that you weren't intrigued enough to give this movie a shot. But obviously, if you go back and listen to some episodes around when this trailer was released, I was kind of shocked because it actually looked like they were going to make me want to see a Transformers movie after basically pumping out shit for the last decade. And then when I told you that this trailer actually looked good to me, I was met with relentless mocking, which is pretty stereotypical Pat. So I dropped the subject and never brought it up again. So the movie comes out around Christmas, and it currently has a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is kind of shocking and made me want to see the movie at some point. So obviously I didn't rush to the theater and see it as soon as it came out because, you know, I still think that I had some reservations because at the end of the day, it is a Transformers movie. But I would say that I went into the movie with kind of high hopes because of the high percent on Rotten Tomatoes. So with that being said, it's definitely the best Transformers movie that's been made, but I'm still kind of shocked that it's holding a 94% score right now because it is by no means not amazing. It's good, just not amazing like that score would indicate. So the story itself in the movie relies a lot on 80s nostalgia. It's basically a mashup of John Hughes, E.T., The Iron Giant, and then just other movies where a kid befriends some creature that the government wants to pick apart and study. So, I mean, that's been done a ton, which is why I'm surprised that this was such a hit with critics. And it, you know, throughout the entire movie, it follows all of the tropes that you would expect. But I will say is that this is the first Transformers movie that actually feels like it could have been directed by Steven Spielberg, which is saying something because he's been an executive producer on all of these abominations. So I don't want to give a lot of the story away since this is still relatively a new movie, but there is one plot point that I wanted to bring up that didn't sit well with me, and that is the fact that most of the movie, Bumblebee has no memory of who he is. So, spoiler alert, he eventually gets his memory back, and he still remembers the events that happened with Haley Steinfeld's character, Charlie. But to me, this is a character we've seen in multiple movies, and him not knowing who he is kind of cheapened the relationship building that took place in my eyes. I don't know. It's weird, but him not being as sentient about what a big deal he is in this robot army, to me, kind of just cheapens the relationships they were building. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but that was like a big plot point in this film that didn't sit well. The one thing I will say about the story, though, that makes it work is that this movie is 100% Charlie's story, and it tells a story of a very human experience, and that, I mean, it just happens to be supplemented by robots. So the other Transformer movies evolved into destruction porn, and this movie learned from those lessons, and it genuinely felt like it was telling a heartfelt story, which I credit to Christina Hodson, who was the writer of this movie. And I didn't realize it was a female writer until I kind of started to pick it apart on IMDb. And I think that it was pretty smart to have a female writer tell the story of a female teenager. So that also gives this movie props for me. I mentioned the action in the other Transformers movie kind of being destruction porn. So I did want to touch on the action in this movie too. And what I will say is I think that this movie definitely reins it in, which is a good thing. There are robot fights, but they are very contained and they're choreographed really well. So it's never overwhelming and I never get lost in all of the explosions, which is a good thing. And I think part of it is this is the cheapest Transformers movies they've made. So they probably didn't put a lot into the budget for explosions. But I think that at the end of the day, it helped the film be better. The acting is also pretty good. Haley Steinfeld is pretty great in this movie. John Cena is John Cena, so nothing crazy there. I think he was better in Blockers, which was a movie we talked about on our last episode with Matt Hurt from The Obsessive Viewer. But in addition, the supporting cast is pretty okay too. So all in all, I'd say I'd give this movie a 3.5 out of 5 for now. As I gestate on it, I could see it going down to a 3, but overall, I am recommending this movie, which I never thought I'd be able to say about a Transformers movie ever again. That being said, I think if any of our listeners, because I know you won't see it, any of our listeners go see it, you got to temper your expectations because it's not a 97 or 94% on Rotten Tomatoes in my eyes.
So I am shocked. Not that you went and saw this because we both see a lot of shitty movies, but I am shocked that a Transformers movie had a plot problem. That's crazy to me. No, of course I'm kidding because they all have plot problems. Mostly the entire plot. So I'm glad to hear that it's only like a little bit of the movie. But I was actually going to ask you about the action because I've heard a lot of good things about this action. Like I can't stand the Michael Bay Transformers movies because they just like give you a seizure the entire time you watch it because it's just jump cut after jump cut after jump cut. Like it just, you don't really know what's happening in those movies with the action. Like it's cool that we have these giant robots fighting other giant robots, but when you can't even tell like what's happening, that's very disappointing. So the fact that they kind of rein that in does sound kind of interesting to me. Like you said, I'm never going to see this movie. There are basically two franchises that I will never watch another movie for, and that's Transformers and Pirates of the Caribbean. You've gotten me enough. Like, you've gotten enough of my money. I am never going to watch another one of those movies. I actually, for like maybe an hour, I did have a reservation for this movie on my AMC app, and then I was like, what am I doing? Like, I'll just not see something this week. I think it was the day before we were leaving for Las Vegas. And I was just like, no, I still got a lot of packing to do and stuff to do, so I'm not going to waste my time seeing this movie. So for like an hour maybe, I had a reservation for this movie, and I was like, nah, I have better things to do than see a stupid Bumblebee movie. But what you didn't bring up that I kind of want to get your thoughts on, because I know this is something that you brought up when we first started talking about the possibility of them making a Bumblebee movie, is the fact that we see Bumblebee in the Transformers movies. Obviously, he's a big part of those Shia LaBeouf movies. So is that going to be a problem for you? Not that you're necessarily going to run out and rewatch any of these Transformers movies, but I know like the canon of things really bugs you. So when you have prequels like this with a brand new character, is this movie going to bug you?
I think that it would bug me if I gave a shit about the other movies. So
sure,
I'll be honest, I haven't retained a whole lot from those other movies, so I couldn't tell you necessarily what the canon of those films are. But I will say the whole time I was interested in what was going to happen with the relationship between him and Charlie. Because obviously in the first Transformers movie that was released, it picks up with Bumblebee just kind of being there and coming across Sam Witwicky. So I didn't know if it was going to end with him and Charlie riding off into the sunset together, if they'd get separated somehow, or what, because this takes place in, I believe, 1987. So there's a good 20 years before the events of the first Transformers film that are unaccounted for. So, I think that if I was more familiar with the canon or remembered more of the canon, it would bother me a little bit more, because I think that there probably are some plot gaps. Believe it or not, I know, shocking, but I think that was, obviously I knew that Bumblebee was getting out of the movie alive, so that bothered me, but I was more interested in that relationship and how they were going to wrap that up.
Yeah, one thing that, and we've talked a little too long about fucking Bumblebee, a Transformers movie, but there was one thing in the trailer, and I know other people have brought this up as well, that it kind of feels like there might be like a love interest there between this fucking robot and this person. That wasn't there, right?
No,
please tell me that wasn't there.
No, I never got that. And she has a love interest in this movie, and the way that they explore that was done really well too. It wasn't that, as stereotypical as this movie is, it didn't end with her and this guy that she's kind of been experiencing things throughout the movie with, kissing or anything like that. So yeah, it's definitely I think that part of the reason this resonated with critics is it's definitely a female driven story.
Sure.
And she's definitely the hero in this movie, which is cool. But the one thing that, again, I'm surprised that everybody's forgiven is all the tropes of this movie. It's easy to see things coming a mile away.
For sure. That's a Transformers movie for you. So I am into a game. I think it came out in 2017, but I'm just now getting around to it because I have a ridiculous backlog of games that I want to play. So the game that I'm into this week is Hellblade: Senua Sacrifice, which there's no way. I hear her name said in the game like a million times, and I still don't quite know how to pronounce it. That's how bad I am with names. So I'll probably pronounce it like 3 or 4 different ways as I'm talking about this game. But I finally finished Red Dead Redemption 2, but we've talked about it a couple of times on the podcast, so I didn't want that to be what I was into. So I got this game for Christmas. Well, sort of. I got a gift certificate to Amazon, and I have like this long list of games as a wish list on Amazon. So it was like the first one on that list. So I was like, okay, sweet. I'm gonna get it, and I'm gonna play it and stream it for a little bit. And I had no idea what this game was. I just heard a lot of good things with it, and I was definitely excited. And I have to say, after streaming it, I think I streamed it for like 6 hours throughout the course of this past week, and I have to say, like, fuck, this game is really, really cool. It's probably one of the more immersive games that I've played in a long time. There is absolutely no tutorial. There's no, like, beginning of this game where they kind of give you a lot of background information. There's no exposition. There's very little. It just completely just drops you in, and you play as Senua. That's the second different way I pronounce that name. She's a Pick warrior who is making her way to Helheim to save her dead lover. And literally, it just starts with her paddling down a river towards Helheim. So you don't get a tutorial. You don't get any exposition telling you what this game's about. The first two names that you see, because as you're paddling down this river, you kind of get the intro credits, like who made this game, all that good stuff. And the first two names that you see as you're paddling down this river is a historical and mental health consultants. And I really liked that because those two things are a huge part of this game. The historical consultant literally gave Ninja Theory, the developer of this game, they literally gave them too much information. So what they did is they took all of the information that was pertinent to them making the game, because they wanted to make it as historically accurate as possible. But with the extra information, they created what they call lore stones, which basically in the game, you go and you interact with these stones, and it basically just spouts out Norse mythology, which I thought was really, really cool. And as a gamer, I love like collecting stuff in games, and that's just one thing that you can collect throughout the game. And being a history buff, I thought that was also kind of cool that it gives you information about this mythology that, yeah, I've seen the Thor movies, so I know a little bit about it, but I don't know a ton about it. So it's kind of cool to know that the information that I'm getting is also very historically accurate. So that's pretty cool. And like I said, this game is very immersive. There is no HUD at all. This game does not hold your hand one bit. It only gives you info, like exposition info, in very small pieces. And most of that is Senua has voices in her head that kind of talk to her throughout the game. And that's where the mental health consultant comes in. A lot of people have praised this game for their interpretation of what somebody going through psychosis goes through. And so a lot of the voices and a lot of the things you see in the game, you can't really trust that much, because you don't know if they're trying to help you or if it's part of her just kind of losing her mind. And hence why I said it was super immersive, because there's no HUD, there's no tutorial. It's just kind of you experiencing all of this with the characters. And I think the developers, Ninja Theory, did a phenomenal job. Basically, it's very hard for video games to have the gamer experience what the main character is experiencing. And I think that Ninja Theory did a really good job of doing everything that they could to have me or whoever's playing this game experience what the character is experiencing. And I thought that was really, really cool. The combat, if you've ever played a Dark Souls game, the combat is very similar. I say it's kind of Dark Souls-esque, but it kind of feels a little dumbed down. So this game, it doesn't hold your hand as far as like telling you what to do or anything like that, but it doesn't let you do things like in a Tomb Raider game. Like you can climb things and you can basically get wherever you want to get to. It's not like that. It feels like that game because of the strong female protagonist and the aesthetic of the game. It kind of feels like a Tomb Raider game in that sense, but you can't do everything that you want to do. Like you can't climb up stuff. It only lets you do that when it wants you to do that. So that's a little frustrating. And as far as the combat, like you literally have a sword the entire time, but the game only lets you take the sword out when it's time for combat. So every time you are going into a combat situation, it will automatically take your sword out for you. So you know right off the bat, okay, there's people to fight. And so it's a little frustrating in that sense. The game does kind of hold your hand in that sense, but the combat is a little bit, like I said, a little bit easier than a Dark Souls game, but it's very similar. But it's really, really cool. And I would say it's probably only like 30% of the game anyways. So if this was a very combat heavy game, I would be very frustrated with the system that they put in place. But because you only have to do a small amount of combat, it doesn't really bother me that much because it feels like a breath of fresh air and it feels really cool. Combat is probably my favorite part of this game because you get it in such small doses that you don't really get tired of it. Like if it was a bigger part of the game, I don't know if I would have had as much fun with this game as I'm having so far. So Hellblade, really, really good. I think I'm not quite sure how long it is because I'm not quite done with it, but I've heard it's fairly short. So if you're looking for just something you can knock out in the afternoon, I would definitely suggest it because it's very, very cool.
Yeah, it does sound pretty cool. I think that if I didn't have such a huge backlog of games to get through, it'd be something I'd definitely check out. So obviously one of my nerdier resolutions was to get through that backlog. So maybe if I can get through them, the games that I still have left to play, I'll check it out.
For sure, man. I would highly recommend it. Like I said, I can't talk about how the game ends, so maybe it kind of ends on a sour note. I don't know. But I heard a lot of great things, so I highly doubt that it ends poorly, but so far I'm really, really enjoying it. Some of the visual puzzles are kind of tedious. I didn't bring that up. So it wasn't probably the best game to stream because sometimes I struggle with puzzles in games. But yeah, there was a lot of moments where I was just like, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. And so that probably didn't make for the best stream. But it's a lot of fun, so I would highly recommend it.
Nice.
All right, so our next segment is just plainly called Comics. Tyler and I read a ton of comics each week, and we like to spotlight one or two an episode. So what'd you read this week?
So I read a comic that actually wasn't a new release this week, but it came out about a week and a half ago. So I picked this up on a whim, and it was Conan. I'm going to fuck it up. Conan. It's not Conan. It's Conan the Barbarian #1, which is written by Jason Aaron and was drawn by Mohamed Azhar. So I am not extremely familiar with the Conan character. I've never read any of the books, and surprisingly, I've never seen any of the movies either. But with that being said, I've always kind of been connected to the character in some weird way. So my dad was really into Conan, I guess, at one point. He had a lot of the novels, and he had some of the graphic novels and comics when I was growing up. So, I don't know. My dad and I never really had the same interests. I've always kind of been a nerd, and he's more of a macho guy. So him having these comic books was always a way that he kind of tried to relate to me, which I definitely appreciated. And he would whenever I was starting to get into comic books whenever I was really little, he would show me these Conan books that he had, and it was always something that we were able to bond over, even though I never actually read them. And funny enough, I guess it's been about a year now, he was going through and cleaning out some stuff from the house that they live in, and he ended up giving me all of his Conan stuff. So now it's part of my collection, and even though I haven't read it and I don't know that I'll go back and read it, it is something that, my dad and I bonded over in some weird way. So with all of that being said, when I saw that there was a relaunch of the character under the Marvel banner, I thought I'd finally give this character a go. So, I just went through the story of how I've been intrigued by the character since I was a kid, but it's not lost on me how cheesy and over masculine this character is. He's basically this buff sword swinging version of a man that every kid wants to grow up to be, and he's honestly a small example of the way that toxic masculinity has shaped the men in our culture. But I did go, so with that being said, I went into this book with pretty low expectations, to be honest. So all of that being said, I do want to actually get to the comic I read, which is issue 1 of this relaunch. I will say it's extremely cheesy, but it's also a lot of fun and very genre. So the comic does a great job of doing a very small intro to the character, but then it gets right to the nonsense. So I don't want to go into crazy specifics of the story, but it looks like this first arc is going to basically deal with this witch and her raining down black magic on Conan. The art in the book is amazing. It feels kind of gothic in a way, And then in that sense, all of the beheadings and the action and the stereotypical masculine images like buff dudes and scantily clad women are drawn perfectly. It's bloody, it's erotic, and I don't know, it's pretty crazy. So yeah, Conan 1 is a bit silly, but that's kind of the endearing nature of the character in a way, which I was fully aware of whenever I picked this book up. So overall, my interest is still piqued. So I'll pick up issue 2 when it's released on the 16th, which is this coming week. But I don't know if I'll keep going with this for the long term.
Yeah, so this was a book that I was somewhat interested in. I didn't know you had that connection with the character with your dad. I did not know that about your dad. But it was, just to be honest, like I go through Comixology because I don't actually get that much from the comic shop anymore. I've definitely weaned down a lot of what I get physical media. I've been trying to do more on Comixology just because comic books take a lot of as much as Tyler and I collect comic books, it's like they take up a lot of room. Like we're redecorating our den, and that's where I keep my comic books, and it's just ridiculous how many in the short time that I've been collecting, how much space those take up now. So I was looking through Comixology when this book came out, and I was like, oh man, this actually kind of sounds interesting. This will be a book that I'll read and I'll talk about on the podcast. And then I remembered, oh yeah, we have Matt on the podcast this week, and we're not going to talk about comics. So I kind of just skipped this one, and I never went back to it. So I'm somewhat interested in it, but I mean, you seemed kind of lukewarm on it a little bit, so maybe I'll just go ahead and skip it.
Awesome, man. So what'd you read this week?
So I read Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, which was written by a guy named Tom Taylor, and the art was done by Juan Cabal. And I'll be honest with you, even though I love the character so much, I kind of rolled my eyes when I first saw that this book was put out. Again, love the character, but we don't need another monthly Spider-Man book. Like, we already have the new Miles Morales that I talked about a few weeks ago. We, of course, have Amazing Spider-Man, and they just finished the Spectacular Spider-Man not too long ago. So it was like, do we really need another Spider-Man monthly book? And they kind of address this in the letter to the fans at the end of this book. They talk about how Amazing Spider-Man has like this wide scope, and they kind of wanted to narrow the focus to the neighborhood, which hence the title. That would kind of make sense. And I'll discuss whether or not they did that here in a little bit. But the reason I ultimately decided to get this book, not just because it was a Spider-Man book, but because Tom Taylor wrote it, and he actually did All New Wolverine, which is a book that I really, really liked. I didn't think I would, but I really enjoyed that book quite a lot, and a lot of that has to do with the writing in that book. So I was like, okay, well, one of my favorite writers is also doing my favorite character, so I'll give it a shot. And I'm really, really glad that I did, because again, I've talked a lot about why I love Spider-Man, so I won't rehash all that, but this book is pretty much nailed it on almost all of the levels. So it starts off by discussing Peter's fear of jumping off buildings when he first became Spider-Man, and how that fear was trumped by his sense of responsibility, which of course the famous Spider-Man saying is, with great power comes great responsibility, and that kind of hits on that, the first level that I like right off the bat. And of course, there was a lot of great humor, kind of sarcastic humor, which is what I kind of associate with Peter Parker as Spider-Man. And so that's always important for me in a Spider-Man book, to have that sarcastic and subtle humor in it. And so I thought that was great. And Peter's back to kind of struggling to make ends meet, and he has roommates in his apartment and stuff like that. And his roommate in his apartment is pretty cool, because it's one of my favorite sort of villains that he has, to kind of like a D-list villain that we've talked about before. I won't ruin it because it's kind of a fun moment in the book. But the only thing this book was lacking in my eyes was the fact that it was more about Peter Parker than it necessarily was about Spider-Man. Like, you get a lot of Spider-Man at the very beginning, but then it's more about Peter Parker. It's more of a Peter Parker's book than a Spider-Man book, which is fine. It's good. There's a cool cliffhanger at the end that I think is going to be interesting. But if I had one small nitpick about this book, is the fact that it's about 75% Peter Parker. Again, not a horrible thing, but I would have liked a little bit more Spider-Man in this. But all in all, it's a really fun book, and I will definitely keep going with it, which is surprising because I did not expect to.
Yeah, so, I mean, you texted me that you were calling dibs on this, and, it was on my radar because I saw it was coming out, but on the same side of that is, I mean, I have such a hard time keeping up with the main title that I didn't want to add another Spider-Man book to my rotation. So it's good to hear that it's quality for sure, but yeah, I'll just stick with the main title, I think.
Yeah, so for those that remember, a couple of weeks ago when I made my Nerd Year's resolution was to get caught up on the main book, Amazing Spider-Man. And it's kind of weird reading this book and then, because I'm like 20 issues behind on the main book. So it's kind of funny reading this book because I kind of get a glimpse into what's going to happen in the main book, because obviously it's the same character, so they're going to feed into each other eventually. But it's just kind of interesting reading a book that you're like 20 issues behind on and reading this book, so I kind of get a glimpse into what, and I'm kind of excited to see what happens to lead the character to the character that I know in Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. So I'm excited to see what kind of happens to lead me to this point.
Yeah, for sure, man. So you ready to dive into some nerd news?
What do you got this week?
So not a ton, but very award heavy. So the first one obviously being that we have not spoken since the Golden Globes occurred last Sunday. So we used to, on the podcast, we would go through all of the nominations and then all of the winners. And since then, I think we've grown and realized that that's not the most exciting way to do things. So instead of going through all of the winners, I definitely just wanted to maybe highlight some of the main ones, because there's definitely a discussion to be had in a couple places. So, I can run through this, and if there's anything that I missed that you want to talk about, let me know. I'll probably skip most of the television unless there's anything you want to talk about from a TV standpoint. But, I mean, personally, I'm not familiar with most of the winners, so I don't know that I have much of an opinion there.
Oh yeah, I completely agree, and I think I tweeted something out because I kind of live tweeted the Golden Globes this year. I like to do that every once in a while, and this year was kind of fun to do that. So I think I tweeted this out, that there's just, eventually when they start giving away the TV awards, there's just going to be a string of awards that I have heard of. I've either not heard of the show or I've not watched any of the shows that they just like give all of the awards to. So yeah, I'm cool with us skipping the TV, because again, where there's so many options with Hulu and Amazon and Netflix and all these other places that are coming out with all these great shows, there's no way that we can watch all of it. So as much as we do watch a lot of it. So yeah, there was a long string of TV awards. I was like, okay, I've never seen that show. I've never seen that show. And there was one award, I can't remember what it was, that I had literally not seen any of the nominees. Not only did I not see the winner, but I hadn't seen any of the nominees. So that's kind of where I'm at with TV.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to kind of cherry pick some categories here from the movies then to talk through. So, starting at the bottom of this list, I have the one that probably impacts us quite a bit, is that the best motion picture animated movie was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which was my favorite movie of 2018, and I believe top 3 for you, right? So
yeah, I think it was 2 or 3. I can't remember where I landed with 8th grade in Into the Spider-Verse, but it was definitely high up for me. And honestly, I guess this all kind of depends on how Endgame ends for me, like how that's going to put a cap on Infinity War. It's going to be weird that Infinity War and Endgame are going to kind of be so related to one another. And I feel like Endgame is going to affect how I feel about Infinity War for sure. But it might ultimately, 10 years from now, might be the movie that I watched more out of the two of them, just because Spider-Man is such a huge character for me, and that movie is so much fun and has a Spider-Man for everything. So depending on how Endgame ends, Into the Spider-Verse might ultimately be the #1 movie of the year for me 10 years down the road.
For sure, man. I totally agree with that reasoning. So another movie that picked up a couple of awards here, so both for Best Screenplay and Best Performance by an Actor in a Supporting Role, is Green Book, which I have not seen, but obviously, like I said, it won Screenplay, and then Mahershala Ali won for Best Supporting Actor. So it's definitely a movie I want to see, even though apparently the guy that put this movie together, he had some anti-Muslim tweets from 2015 that he had to apologize for, which is super awkward because Mahershala Ali is Muslim. So, he might be a bag of shit, but apparently in the movie, I guess, is okay. So,
yeah, I guess the guy that wrote it, his dad is Viggo Mortensen's character in the movie.
Yeah.
So I don't know his like filmography. I don't know if this is like his first movie. I would assume because of his personal interest in the movie. I think, again, I'm not on IMDb, which would make it really easy to answer this question. But I don't know if he's written anything else. But my guess is he's probably not going to write a whole lot from this moment on. And honestly, I don't think that they give him the Oscar because of this. Like, I with everything that's happened the last couple of years with Oscars so white and all that good stuff. Well, not good, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
There's no way that they give him the Oscar for this movie. I mean, the movie could be phenomenal. I've heard really good things. I also have not seen it. I haven't had much opportunity to see it because I haven't seen it on AMC yet. I don't know if it's gotten its wide release yet. I'm sure leading up to the Oscars that a lot of these movies get re-released in more of a wide release. So I will eventually see this movie. It doesn't look all that fascinating to me because I think we've seen this story before, but I love Viggo Mortensen. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan, obviously, so I am definitely into basically anything that he's into. So, yeah, I'm definitely intrigued to see this movie, but it's going to definitely put a sour taste in my mouth.
Yeah, for sure. So I totally agree. I think that a lot of the Oscars that this movie was maybe going to win are going to be extremely impacted by that guy and what he had said at one point. So we'll see.
For sure.
Best Actress in a Supporting Role is Regina King for If Beale Street Could Talk, which I'm not familiar with either the actress or the movie, to be honest. So I don't have any thoughts there. You?
No, I'm going to do a nerd favorite segment about the Golden Globes. So
okay,
and it involves her acceptance speech. So I'll move on.
Perfect. Best Performance by an Actor in a Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy was Christian Bale for Vice, which, if you listened to our top 10 last week, you know that I feel was very deserved. He was amazing in that movie.
For sure, and I tweeted this out as well. Like, if he lost, like if he didn't win for that performance, I was going to shut the Golden Globes off because it was done for me because he was the obvious choice for me.
Yeah, so Best Performance by an Actress, Musical or Comedy, was Olivia Colman for The Favorite, which we talked about. I think our wives are going to make us see that movie at some point, so I'll have a better opinion after that happens. But right now, don't know the movie, not extremely familiar with the actress.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen her in anything. Like, she kind of looks familiar, so maybe I've seen her in a bit role here and there. But that movie just looks like it's going to be a chore to sit through.
Oh, for sure, man. It does not look funny to me, but I mean, I've been proven wrong before. So Best Performance by an Actor in a Motion Picture Drama was Rami Malek for Bohemian Rhapsody. So we'll talk about Bohemian Rhapsody more, obviously, when we get to Best Motion Picture Drama. But, you know, just isolating his performance from other thoughts on that movie, I mean, he completely embodied Freddie Mercury. I thought that he did deliver an amazing performance. So I think that there are some other people in the category that could have won that, but I'm not upset with him taking away Best Actor. Like, he was Freddie Mercury in that movie.
100%. I know a few people have complained on Twitter, because that's basically all that Twitter is, that he didn't sing in that movie, that he was just lip syncing, so that they feel like he shouldn't have won it because he wasn't singing. But I mean, come on, Freddie Mercury is one of the best, if not the best vocalists of all time. Did you really think that he was actually singing in that movie? Like, get a fucking grip on reality, man. That's not how movies work.
Freddie Mercury had such a unique voice. If he had done his version of Freddie Mercury, then I think the movie wouldn't have been successful because people wouldn't have been able to differentiate his singing from Freddie's, and yeah, that would have been a disaster. I think they made the right choice there.
Oh yeah, 100%. But he was fantastic in that movie, even though I did have my problems with the movie ultimately, which we'll get to here in a second. But yeah, I thought he was phenomenal. I had no problem with him winning this award.
Perfect. So, best performance by an actress in a motion picture drama, Glenn Close for The Wife. So, I am not familiar with this movie at all. Didn't know it existed before the Golden Globes. But I will say one of my favorite tweets about the Golden Globes was concerning this, and it was, the announcer saying, Borat voice, the winner is the wife. So I thought that was pretty funny. So, but besides that, no idea what this movie is.
No, I'd never heard of this movie before the Golden Globes, and I mean, I don't know if I'll watch it. It depends on how much it gets nominated for the Oscars, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, this was the only thing it was nominated for with the Golden Globes. So I highly doubt I'll see this movie.
For sure. So best director was Alfonso Cuarón for Roma.
Which I'm sure Matt was very excited for because he talked a lot about this movie when he joined us last week for our top 10 films of 2018. I'm sure that I will eventually watch this. I've heard amazing things about it, and I think that he's a very talented director, but the movie just doesn't look interesting to me. So I hope that it's one of those things that I'm like putting off because it looks like a chore, kind of like The Favorite, and then I eventually sit down to watch it and it kind of blows me away, which of course I kind of expect it to, just because Matt, I do trust his opinion and I've heard really good things about it. So I hope it kind of takes me by surprise, but yeah, the movie kind of looks like a chore.
Yeah, I'll get around to it eventually as well, but I am putting it off for sure. Let's see. Best motion picture, musical, or comedy. Green Book, which, I think we said our piece there. Any other thoughts? Sure. And then best motion picture drama. I think that this is the biggest point of conversation. Surprisingly to me, the winner was Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yes. So I was live tweeting this entire event, and then it got to that last award, and I was just like so dumbfounded that they gave it to this movie that I don't even think I said anything on Twitter about it, because I was just like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I thought it was a La La Land Moonlight situation again from the Oscars a couple of years ago when they clearly just made a mistake. Like, it was so weird that they gave it to this movie. And I hated the fact that, is it Brian May? The guitarist for Queen was like going out on Twitter and be like, I guess we showed you, we had the last laugh because we won this, so obviously we're a better movie than some critics were saying. No, you weren't. They just got it wrong. Like, this movie is not bad by any means. It's a very entertaining. I love Queen. I love their music, and I thought that the performances in this movie were phenomenal. But, we definitely had our problems. I especially had my problems with how they kind of frame Freddie Mercury in this movie. So, this movie is not the best movie. And it's kind of silly. I thought it was silly that it was even in that category to begin with. But to win is just laughable to me.
Yeah, so I was extremely surprised, like I was saying, that this movie won. But I like the Golden Globes. I think the Golden Globes is a good award show, and I think that they get to the point a lot better than the Oscars do. Like, they have all of these categories 100%. And they're able to do it in like 3 hours. So I've put a lot of stock into the Golden Globes over the last few years, and I don't know the details of it, but apparently the running joke in Hollywood is that you can buy a Golden Globe.
Absolutely.
So I think that probably has something to do with it here, if I'm being honest, and that's why Bohemian Rhapsody won. That being said, I don't want to beat a dead horse because we have belittled this guy a lot on our podcast because he's a piece of shit, but I'm surprised, especially with the climate that we live in, that they gave a movie best best drama that was directed by a fucking pedophile. Like, whether he was fired 100%. Or not, he he directed 90% of this movie, and he's a piece of shit. And I hate that. I saw some stuff on Instagram where he had to put out like a statement, and he's really celebrating that this movie won. He's saying that he had to leave the production to deal with some family issues, and that wasn't granted by the studio, so he was removed after 90% of the movie was shot. And no hard feelings, never had any issues with Rami Malek, which is what the word on the street has been. So I hate that Bryan Singer is kind of celebrating this, because he shouldn't be allowed to celebrate anything, because he's a piece of shit, like I said. So that bothers me quite a bit. And I think that, if you go back and listen to our review, I think one of the other things that bothers me just from the movie standpoint is that a lot of this film isn't historically accurate. A lot of it was fabricated for drama in this movie. Apparently at Live Aid, Freddie Mercury didn't know he had HIV yet. At Live Aid, they didn't have like this big breakup right before Live Aid. So a lot of it was fabricated, which rubs me the wrong way as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. And honestly, I forgot that Bryan Singer had even directed 90% of this movie until, of course, after this one, everybody was making a big deal about it. And I was like, oh yeah, he directed most of this movie, because I had forgotten about it, because I wanted to forget that he even existed, and I kind of did. And then, of course, he came out with that Instagram post, which was actually kind of a cool picture. If you're not a fucking pedophile and a piece of shit, I would have enjoyed that picture, because I love like behind the scenes kind of stuff, and him sitting in his chair and like directing that music video is a pretty cool picture. But fuck you, you're a terrible person, so get out of here. And I even posted this on our Facebook. Like, I just said, like, dude, go the fuck away. Like, just go away. Nobody wants to hear from you ever again, because you're a piece of shit.
Yeah. Oh, for sure, man. It's garbage. So, yeah, definitely surprising. I don't think that movie is going to win Best Picture by any means. Like, I know that typically, the Golden Globes are a good precursor for who's going to win an Oscar. I don't think there's any way this movie wins an Oscar. Maybe Rami Malek will win, but I think Christian Bale will beat him out. So this will get nominated, but I don't think it's going home with anything.
Honestly, man, I don't know if this even gets nominated. Like, that's how undeserving I think it is. Again, not a terrible movie by any stretch. It has some really entertaining moments, but Best Picture, no.
Yeah, and I think the biggest disappointment for me is I'm a huge Queen fan. I love Queen.
Absolutely.
I think they're probably the best band of all time, and I hate that their biopic is surrounded by all of this nonsense. So
100%.
Cool. So that is the Golden Globes, man. You ready for the next story?
Yeah, it feels like this is like half of the episode is us.
Yeah, I should probably just cut it. We should probably just go to the main topic, but I'll be quick. So I was going to do a story around Black Widow, there being a discussion that it's going to be rated R. So I thought that was kind of interesting that Marvel and Disney are considering tiptoeing into a rated R movie in their universe, which I think would be cool, but we'll see if that happens.
Yeah, I have my reservations that'll actually happen, like you said, because it's Disney. But, I mean, she's a spy, and she's a badass spy. Like, that sounds amazing to me. Like a super dark James Bond-esque type of movie where, I mean, even the James Bond movies aren't rated R, so as far as I understand. So, I mean, to have a super dark spy movie as her solo movie would be pretty fucking badass, and I would be all for it. But I don't think it happens.
Yeah, I don't either. I think that they may cash in on the Deadpool cow once they get 20th Century Fox, but even that, I'd be surprised by, I think. So we'll see.
For sure.
So the last thing I have is a pretty good segue into our main topic. So a lot of times we talk about these award shows, like we just talked about the Golden Globes, and about how we don't always agree with award shows, and it's hard to find one that really represents how we feel, like between the Academy Awards or the Golden Globes or whatever. And I think I found some awards that we actually would agree with. So I'm sure they've done it for a few years now, but I've never really paid attention to it. But Rotten Tomatoes does the Golden Tomato Awards.
Yeah, I've heard about this before.
And these winners make a lot more sense than like what we just talked through on the Golden Globes or what we talked through every year with the Academy Awards. So I'm obviously not going to go through every category because we just did that with the Golden Globes, but just to give you a taste, like they do like best movie wide release, best movie limited release. They do it by genre, and obviously this is all based on the critics. So the critics that go into Rotten Tomatoes. So like the wide release best picture was Black Panther, the limited release was Roma, directorial debut was A Star Is Born, and then as you get into genre, the best action adventure was Mission Impossible, animated Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, best comedy Eighth Grade, comic book movie Black Panther, documentary Won't You Be My Neighbor, drama Black Klansman, foreign language Roma, horror movie A Quiet Place. So, I mean, you can keep going through all of these genres, but it almost lines up exactly with, I think, how we recapped 2018 in some ways.
Yeah, so like I said, I've heard about this before. I kind of briefly glanced at it, but I didn't go through too much. But it kind of makes sense. Like, you would think all of these critics, I mean, aren't the final word on how good these movies are. But, I mean, we do put a lot of stock into that because these people watch movies profession. So it's kind of cool that we have this to look back on, because sometimes that doesn't always line up with the movies that we see with the Golden Globes or the Academy Awards. And it sounds like there's more movies that are on our top 10s that we just did last week on this type of award than the Oscars or the Golden Globes.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, I think a lot of award shows think they're pretentious and take themselves too seriously.
For sure.
And when you break it down just by the amount of people that liked movies, I think that it makes a lot more sense. So that being said, like I mentioned, a pretty good segue into our main topic, which is our Rotten Tomato film draft.
All right, so like Tyler said, we are getting into our Rotten Tomatoes film draft for 2019. But before we do that, we have to recap our 2018 results. This is something that we've done. I think this is this 2018 was the third year that we've done it, because you won the first year, I won the second year, and then we'll get into what happened this year. So this 2019 will be the fourth film draft that we've done. If you're not aware, basically we nominate a certain amount of films depending on what's going to be released in the upcoming year, and we draft them. We just kind of go back and forth, and we draft them, and whoever has the best combined score at the end of the year gets to make the other person do something silly. The first year Tyler won, I had to cosplay at Indie PopCon as Slave Leia. Last year, Tyler had to post a picture of him at Indie PopCon to Reddit's subreddit Roast Me. So that was kind of fun, and we read some of our funniest results on that roast. So that was kind of fun, and we'll get into who won this year momentarily, but that's kind of how the film draft works. It was something that I've been wanting to do for years and years when we first started the podcast, and I didn't really like the box office challenge because I feel like that doesn't take a ton of skill. Not that this takes a ton of skill either, because we're basically just guessing, but I feel like you can guess a little bit better with like who wrote it and who directed it and how these films have done in the past. And so I feel like it takes a tiny bit more skill in this. So that's kind of where we came up with it. So I'm not going to go through all of the films and what their scores were from last year. I'll just kind of highlight each of our best film and our worst film as far as the Rotten Tomatoes film score is concerned. So Tyler's film, his best film was actually a tie. He had two 97% films, and that is Black Panther and Mission Impossible Fallout. Now, I should probably have mentioned that this is a score, basically what we do, because the scores change depending on how many reviews it gets. It's a week after it gets released. So that's when I take the screenshot on my phone on Rotten Tomatoes. That's when I post it to the website. So this is the score when I posted this. So you may look on Rotten Tomatoes and Black Panther and Mission Impossible Fallout may not have a 97%, but I'm just going by what's on our website, thenerdspodcast.com. And then his worst film is Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Grindelwald, which was a 40%, and I will remind everyone that it kind of serves him right, because he only picked this film to be a dick to me because he knew that I wanted it. So, I mean, it kind of worked out for me in a way, because it was definitely by far his worst film, so it kind of serves him right there. So my best film was, not surprisingly, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, a 97%. And then my worst film was Venom, again, not that surprisingly, at 30%. So technically, I still have Dark Phoenix to go. That got pushed back a couple of times. Like, I think it originally was going to come out in like November or something like that, and then it got pushed back to February, and then it just recently got pushed back again to June, I believe. So as you could probably figure out just by listening to the numbers that I just said for our best film and our worst film, Tyler has a substantial lead. He's essentially, I mean, he has already won because I did the math. Even if we still counted Dark Phoenix would have to get 149% for me to beat Tyler. So that's obviously not mathematically possible. So we're going to go ahead and give the win to Tyler. And the thing that I've been looking forward to this entire episode is we have not talked about this yet. So I will find this out as you nerds are finding it out as well. Tyler was tasked at bringing me punishment for losing this Rotten Tomatoes film draft. So I'm very curious to find out what that punishment is.
So I've known what your punishment is going to be for quite a while now, and it has killed me to keep it inside because I don't know. I'm biased, obviously, but I love it so much. So, you know, so far the two punishments we've done as a result of this have been about embarrassment, right? But we haven't done a punishment that's been like torturous yet. So that's the route I'm going. And, you know, I'm a good friend. You had a Nerd Year resolution that you wanted to do more Facebook Live reviews of movies. So I'm going to do you a favor, and I'm going to pick a movie each month that you have to do a Facebook Live review of. And, you know, I know that you like to talk, so each review has to be at least 8 minutes long.
Okay.
So I've kind of gone through this. I think that, you know, looking back at the last two punishments we've done, like, they've been relatively short punishments. So, you know, if you don't want to do a movie every month, like, that's a commitment. So I'm willing to do half a year if that's okay with you. Whichever you're more comfortable with. I mean, obviously, I'm kind of giving you some rope here because I don't want to be fucked over if I lose this year. But you know, I don't know that it's fair to give you a year-long commitment whenever the last two punishments have been, you know, a few hours.
I'm cool with a year long. I mean, I also made a Nerd Year's resolution to watch pretty much everything that comes out. Like, I want there to be like 3 times throughout the year that I can't go see a movie because I've seen all of them. So yeah, I'm cool with doing a year. I think it'll be a chore for sure because I'm sure there's a couple of Bumblebees in there that I'm not gonna want to watch. That of course that's what you're gonna pick. So I think that'll be fun. I think it'll be entertaining for everybody on Facebook Live to watch me just gut through a review every once in a while.
Yeah, so you'd be lucky to be seeing Bumblebee. Spoiler alert, that's not happening. So I have January, February, March, and April already picked out. And
okay, hit me with them.
April is my masterpiece. I can't fucking wait for this one because the trailer makes me cringe so bad. So January was going to be A Dog's Way Home, but it has a 60% on Rotten Tomatoes, so I'm not fucking chancing it. So instead it's going to be Second Act, starring Jennifer Lopez.
Oh, God damn it. God damn it.
So that will be the film you got to see in January, and you better hurry. It's got to still be in theaters. So, and I did check AMC in Evansville to make sure it was still showing. So, February will be What Men Want.
Oh, fuck. I regret this already.
March will be A Medea Family Funeral.
But I haven't seen any of the other ones. I'll be lost.
Yeah, I guess you have some movies to watch before March.
Fuck that.
And then April, I don't know. April, I don't think it's going to get better than April. So April is going to be Breakthrough. Have you seen the trailer for Breakthrough?
I have not.
All right. So this is the movie that stars the larger woman from This Is Us. And it has Mike Colter in it, who's Luke Cage, and it has Topher Grace in it.
Oh my God, that's where they're like in a coma?
Yeah, it's the God movie.
Oh, fuck. That's going to be, oh my God. I'm I'm already, my butthole clinched a little bit when I remember what that movie was. That is going to be so awful.
Yeah, so I'm really bummed out you haven't seen the trailer for that one because...
Oh, no, I have. I just didn't remember it.
The
part
where Mike Coulter, who plays Luke Cage, is like, I heard a voice telling me to go back. And the guy he's acting against says, you mean like God was talking to you? And then he looks at the camera and says, well, that's the problem. I don't believe in God. Like... That I can't fucking wait for that one. So, yeah. So that's your year through April. So I gotta wait and see what comes out the rest of the year to keep this going. But yeah, I'm pretty proud of it. I can't wait. I can't wait to watch these reviews.
It actually, like, when you first told me, like, literally right now is the first time I heard it. I was like, well, that's not going to be that bad. I pretty much see every movie that, like, I feel like I got off easy. And then you started listing some of the movies, and like the movies that I was just like, as I'm watching the trailers, I'm like, well, I guess I'm not going to check off my one time that I have to go see everything because I wasn't planning on seeing any of these movies. And so I was just going to wait until they already got out of the theaters to try to see everything. So yeah, it's a pretty good punishment now that you've listed all the movies that you're going to have me go see. So I will have to review Second Act this Friday because I don't feel like it's going to be in theaters for very long.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I wish I could be there just to see the crowd that you're a part of watching this movie with. Like,
well,
what men want.
I doubt Second Act is going to have very many people in it.
No, I mean, at this point, you'll probably get off being the only person in the theater for that one. But, what men want. You may be the only person with a penis in that theater.
That movie is going to be so bad. Have you seen the Mel Gibson one?
No, I have not.
That's what women want, obviously.
Correct.
It's Mel Gibson. But, yeah, it's a female version of that movie, and that movie was fucking awful.
Yeah. I can't imagine this is going to be good, man.
I guess that's the point. Yeah, for sure.
Perfect. So, with that being said, you ready to set up 2019?
All right, so I kind of went back and forth about this, about whether or not to include Dark Phoenix, because technically it was on last year's list, but I decided against it. So Dark Phoenix will not be part of this list. I'm going to run down them real quick, and I put them in the order that they were released, or their current release date. I think we've had this every year where at least one of them got changed. So I'm just going by the IMDb release date currently. So since I lost this past year in 2018, I'll be picking first. And then, like I said earlier, we'll just go back and forth until we run out of movies. So the movies for this year, the first one is the Lego Movie Part 2. That gets released in February 8th. Alita Battle Angel, February 14th. Captain Marvel, March 8th. Us, March 22nd. Shazam, April 5th. Pet Sematary, April 5th as well. Hellboy, April 12th. Detective Pikachu, May 10th. John Wick, Chapter 3, May 17th. The live-action remake of Aladdin, May 24th. Godzilla, King of the Monsters, May 31st. Men in Black International, June 14th. Toy Story 4, June 21st. Spider-Man Far From Home, July 4th. The live-action Lion King, sort of live-action Lion King remake, July 19th. New Mutants, which I think New Mutants might have been on a list previous, but it kind of got pushed back a couple of times. But it's on this list as well, and that's August 2nd, hopefully. It, Chapter 2 is September 6th. Joker, the non-DCEU Joker origin story, comes out on October 4th, which is one that I'm afraid might get pushed back. Sonic the Hedgehog movie, which is another one I'm afraid might get pushed back. That's November 8th. And then Star Wars Episode 9 is December 20th.
Hey, correct me if I'm wrong. And I just realized this, and this is probably a conversation better left for off the podcast, but I don't see Avengers Endgame.
Oh, shit, I might have forgotten about that one. I went through IMDb and their future releases, and I may have just missed Endgame. So that's my fault. But it's also Tyler's fault because I texted him all these movies. And I was like, hey, is there one that you want to add or take off? And you were like, and you never said anything to me. So I was like, okay, I guess we're going with this. So yeah, that's my fault. So which one do you want to take off then? My vote would be Sonic.
Yeah, I would say either Sonic or Alita, because I'm not going to see either of those. So, but Alita,
I would
I guess,
rather, since Alita is a Robert Rodriguez movie,
yeah,
I would rather see that movie than Sonic. So we'll go ahead and take off Sonic.
perfect. I think that's a pretty good trade.
So I'll have to write down Endgame because I'll forget about it again. I don't know is it like April something?
Yeah, the end of April.
Because I know that got pushed up a couple of times. So, okay. So we took off Sonic and we added Endgame, which is, again, Tyler's fault. So if you notice that Dumbo is not on there because I refuse to go see that movie. So,
and for what it's worth, I would not make you go see it as part of your punishment either. Instead, you'll be seeing Medea Family Funeral. So I did that
well,
one for you.
I appreciate that. All right.
So I think the way that we've done this is the loser gets to pick first, just like the NFL draft. So
yeah. Yeah. I really had a hard time with my first pick because going into it, obviously, I knew that I was losing or going to lose, so I was going to pick first. And knowing Tyler, there is a couple of them that I feel like are pretty obvious first choices. And I did this a couple of years ago where I decided to just pick the movies that I wanted to root for the most. And I'm going to go with... We had this discussion between Endgame and Episode 9. I think it was either last episode. It was probably 2 episodes ago. And I said that I was most anticipating Endgame just because Infinity War and Endgame are going to be linked forever. So I'm going to go Avengers Endgame with my first pick just because that was the most anticipated movie for me of 2019. So I'm going to go with Avengers Endgame.
yeah, I mean, I think that that's a good choice. I mean, all of the Avengers movies have been rated pretty well. Yeah, I mean, I think that one's going to be good. I don't see how that movie doesn't do well with critics. So good choice. Probably would have been my choice. But a couple years, so the year I lost, I got burned because I kept putting off Wonder Woman. I was like, he's never going to pick Wonder Woman. I think it's going to be great. And I credit that entire loss to me not getting Wonder Woman, which ended in the 90%. And so I am not going to let that happen again with the strong female character. And I am going to take Captain Marvel.
Which is good because that would have been my next pick for sure. So
perfect.
All right, so that makes it a little bit easier. I get both of the movies that I wanted. So I'm going to go with Episode 9. So Star Wars Episode 9. Super excited. I mean, I would be excited for this anyways, but Force Awakens was so good. And JJ is back for Star Wars. So he's doing Episode 9. I'm definitely looking forward to it. I think that a lot of people are looking forward to it, not just because it's a Star Wars movie, but because it's going to rebound, or it should be a rebound from The Last Jedi, which I didn't hate as much as other people hated. I thought it was a really good movie. It's definitely not as good as The Force Awakens, so I'm definitely curious to see how they're going to... I don't think they're going to retcon as much as some people hope they will, but I'm definitely interested to see where that movie picks up.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick. The Star Wars movies, even though Last Jedi wasn't met with a ton of fanfare and people have kind of soured on it, I think that movie did pretty well on Rotten Tomatoes. So, and obviously you want to pick movies that you're rooting for. So, good pick. My next pick is... So, I'll be honest. I did not do much homework for this. I'm kind of winging it. I'm pick to pick. We'll see what's left. But for me, I don't see how there's any way that Toy Story 4 doesn't do well with critics. So I'm going with Toy Story 4.
Yeah, it's always a safe pick going with the Pixar movie in this particular draft. That would have been my next pick, so you're killing me right now? All right, so that was, like I said, it was going to be my next pick, so I'm kind of scrambling a little bit. I will go with, just because Get Out was so good, and I don't think that his follow-up is going to be bad at all, I'm going to go with Us, which is, of course, the Jordan Peele, his horror follow-up to Get Out, even though they're not related at all. But he knocked it out of the park with Get Out so well that there's just no way that this movie isn't going to be good. The trailer looks amazing, so I just trust him after Get Out so much that there's just no way that movie is going to be bad.
Yeah, I mean, great pick. I think that those are the types of movies that honestly win these drafts, or the movies that we don't expect to end in the 90%, and then they do. And I believe Get Out wasn't part of our draft that year, but it did end in the 90s. So I'd imagine that critics are still in love with Jordan Peele, and he's obviously a very talented guy, so that one's going to end pretty well. So that's a good pick. My next pick, and this strategy has worked for me 2 out of 3 times, I guess. So I'm going to stick with trusting certain studios. And with that being said, I am going to go with Spider-Man Far From Home.
So I was kind of cringing because I was hoping that it would slide one more. Because like you said, with us, like the movies that are kind of, I don't want to say that movies necessarily under the radar, but those are the types of movies that win you these types of drafts. And so I was like, I got to get Us because I think that's going to be a big one. But my next one was definitely going to be Spider-Man for sure. It's going to hurt me a little bit because a part of me is going to be rooting against Spider-Man just because it's no longer part of my Rotten Tomatoes film draft. So the next one, I didn't want to get caught not knowing what my backup plan was going to be. So the next one, I'm going to go with the other animated movie that's on our list, which is Lego Movie 2. And that's just strictly because the Lego Movie, the first one, was so good. Lego Batman wasn't as good, but it still did, as far as I understand, it still did pretty well on Rotten Tomatoes as well. And they're kind of going back to the original Lego movie. So I'm definitely intrigued how they're going to do like the post-apocalyptic stuff, and everything that we've seen for this movie looks really funny. And I love that type of humor, that Phil Lord, Christopher Miller kind of sarcastic humor that we see in Into the Spider-Verse and we saw in Lego Movie. So I'm definitely intrigued by this movie, and I think it looks really funny.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick. What was the Ninjago movie didn't do very well, but
I don't think they had anything to do with that movie.
Correct.
Though.
I think that movie is going to be great. The trailer looks really funny too. So, yeah, good pick. I am going to go with It Chapter 2.
Okay.
So the first It movie ended, I believe, at 85%, or it ended really well. So this is a direct continuation with the same exact director and all that good stuff. So you bring in these adult actors that are really great. I just can't imagine this movie's not good. So I have high hopes for It Chapter 2.
So you talked a little bit ago about not wanting to take Wonder Woman because you were like, oh, well, it's a DC movie. He's not going to take it. And that was kind of what you regretted. One of my big regrets from a couple of years ago was how I trashed The Jungle Book so much. And I was like, that movie's not even on my radar. I'm glad that you took it, blah, blah, blah. And I couldn't have been more wrong. Like, I don't think I've been more wrong about a thing that I've said on this podcast than me trashing The Jungle Book that year on this. I think it was the first Rotten Tomatoes film draft that we did. So, and I say a lot of stupid shit on this podcast, but I don't think I've been more wrong about a thing on the podcast than what I said about The Jungle Book. So you want to rectify your mistake with Wonder Woman with picking Captain Marvel. I definitely want to rectify my mistake of not trusting Jon Favreau and The Jungle Book, and I'm going to take The Lion King, the live-action remake of The Lion King, because he's doing that, and he's kind of perfected that live-action remake to a certain extent. So I'm going to take The Lion King with my next pick.
Yeah, and I think that's a good pick. I would have picked it if you hadn't, because it kind of goes back to trusting the studio, because Disney has a pretty good Rotten Tomatoes track record with their live-action remakes. So definitely a good pick. That being said, the only reservation I had was if people say, why does this movie exist? Because it's not actually live action like we've discussed on the podcast, but it looks beautiful in that trailer. I think it's going to be great. So I think that you got a winner on your hands. That being said, I am going to go with what has worked in the past again. And I'm a little nervous about this one, but I shouldn't be, given the first 2 films ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. So I'm going John Wick 3. Both the first and second chapters ended at like 85 and 89%. So I think that it's a bit of a riskier pick. It could be bad, but I just got to go with history. So yeah, John Wick.
Yeah, this was one that I really struggled with when I was making the list. Not whether or not I was going to put it on there, but how high I was going to pick it. Just because, like you said, those first two movies did really well. I know the first one was just kind of took everybody by storm because Keanu Reeves doesn't necessarily have the best track record with movies, and I think a lot of people wrote that movie off before they even saw it, and then it definitely took people by surprise. And the second one's also very, very good. Not quite as good as the first one, but I don't know how long you can continue that. And I think this is the last movie that they're doing, so I'm glad that they're kind of capping it off with a trilogy, but I don't know if people are going to have fatigue with John Wick. I certainly haven't because I thought those movies were really good. Like I said, the second one isn't as good as the first one, but it's still really, really good. So I was definitely debating that movie about how high I was going to pick it. So yeah. I think this next one is going to be a surprise for you, and maybe I could have waited a little bit longer to pick it because it was a movie that you almost had me take off, but I was kind of cheating with this one. Alita Battle Angel is going to be my next pick, only because I've heard some initial Twitter reactions to this movie, and they're all very positive, so I'm kind of cheating a little bit on this one because I already kind of know that some people have seen it and kind of liked it. They haven't had their review embargo lifted just yet. We actually, kind of behind the scenes, we had Glass on this list originally, but reviews started trickling in as I was making this list, so we decided to take it off because, again, we've already known some of the information beforehand, so we decided that was kind of cheating. So I'm cheating a little bit with this movie, but you can never really trust those Twitter, like the first reactions for these movies, because you never really know. Because I heard, I think Justice League or maybe Batman v Superman, like the Twitter reactions, the first reactions to those movies were very, very positive, and then it ended up being that those movies are trash. So I'm definitely going out on a limb with this movie. I probably could have gotten it a little bit later, but like I said, I'm kind of cheating.
Gotcha. Yeah, definitely cheating, but that's okay. Unless I lose this year.
I can't lose 2 years in a row in a game that I made up.
So similar to you, I probably could have waited on this movie, but we are starting to get to the point where I'm getting less and less confident in my picks. And for whatever reason, this movie looks like a lot of fun. I think that it will end with a fresh review score. So I am going Shazam.
Yeah, that's a good pick because normally you would think that I wouldn't be excited for a DC EU movie, but everything that we've seen about this movie looks really, really fun. So yeah, that actually was what I was kind of debating between Battle Angel and Shazam. So I'm not glad that you took it, but I mean it's good for you that you took it because it would have been my next pick for sure.
Perfect. We are getting into the shit.
Yeah. So it's really tough at this point. You're kind of just taking shots in the dark at this point. Like we said, I think that this Rotten Tomatoes film draft takes a little bit more skill than a box office challenge, but at this point, like there's not a ton of things that we're going off of. So I'm just gonna kind of go your strategy with Shazam, and I'm gonna take something that I think looks really fun. The next two picks I think look really fun and I think are going to take people by surprise, but they could be the reason I lose this if they just shit the bed, because I thought kind of the same thing with Venom. Not necessarily that it was going to be fun, but I thought that if they kind of stuck with the horror element, they were kind of building this like separate Spider-Man horror villain kind of universe over at Sony, and I should have been a little bit more hesitant to pick Venom because Sony shit the bed with that movie. But I think that's kind of the make or break when it comes to stuff like that, is you're going to take a swing at one of these movies that you think could be good, and then it really just depends on how it turns out. So I'm going to go with Detective Pikachu. I think that there's no way that this movie, like before, I think I've shit on this movie before just because I was like, there's no way that this movie's going to be good. And then we see the first trailer and it looks really, really cool. So I am definitely excited for this movie. And I think that ultimately it will do well with critics, because I don't think that critics are willing to admit, but their expectations do play a part. And I don't think a lot of critics are going to have too high of expectations going into this movie. And I think it will definitely play to that. So Detective Pikachu is my next pick.
Yeah, I think that movie has potential for sure. And I definitely agree. Like we're in the we're in the point of the draft where these are the movies that will make or break us. So, some of these movies are going to end reviewed really well, but it's a shot in the dark. I have no idea which ones are going to end well with critics and which ones are going to shit the bed. So obviously there's some movies on here that I think have potential, but not enough potential to be confident in them. So I am going to go with, I think that I'm going to go, I don't know. There's a couple that I don't know if I could hold off a couple more rounds because they're not on your radar. Let's see. I'm going to go Pet Sematary.
Okay.
So I think that the first trailer, or the only trailer that's been released for that, looks really creepy and really good. And obviously, the most recent Stephen King stuff that has come out in the last 2 years, besides Dark Tower, has been met pretty positively. The only thing I don't know is that this is a remake, so that could rub people the wrong way. So I'm a little hesitant, but I do think that first trailer looks really good. So I'm going to go with that.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of go back on what I said earlier about my next 2 picks are going to be something that I think are going to take people by surprise and are going to be really fun. I'm going to I think I can wait on my second one that I was thinking about. So hopefully you don't take it. But we're starting to get to the shit, like you said. And I think, even though I don't think we necessarily need a Joker origin story, I think the people that are involved with Martin Scorsese producing this, and then Todd Phillips, even though I thought it was kind of a weird choice, more I think about it, the Joker does have a little humor to him. At least he thinks it's humorous, so maybe that works. And Joaquin Phoenix is a really good actor. So I'm just going to go all in with that talent. And hopefully I can get my other movie that was going to be my second pick. So I'm going to go with Joker.
So I think that was one that I was putting off because I didn't think you'd take it so early because you've been very vocal about how much you hate it. But I do know that you saw the article where somebody was praising it that has seen it. So I planned on taking that. I think that might be, if that movie ends up paying off, that's probably the nail in my coffin. That's my Wonder Woman this year, is I didn't take it soon enough because it was on my radar for sure. But that being said, we got Hellboy, Aladdin, Godzilla 2, Men in Black, and New Mutants left. And I know what movie you're talking about that you're waiting on. I know 100% is probably Hellboy. I think that trailer looks fucking terrible, so I'm not taking it. I am going to roll the dice and put some money on a movie that I think looks not great, but that has the potential to do okay because of the studio behind it, and that's Aladdin. So
okay, I was kind of hoping Hellboy would slip through the cracks just because I knew Aladdin was still sitting there, and I was like, him being a Disney fanboy as he is, he's definitely going to pick that one. So I'm glad that you proved me right, even though, you saw through what I was talking about really quickly. So I'm glad that you don't think that Hellboy looks good because I think it looks really, really fun.
Yeah, we'll see. I think that Aladdin has the potential to do well, 100% dependent on Will Smith. So obviously that first picture of him as the genie is fucking silly as shit. But, I guess he went on record saying that most of the time he's CGI. So he won't look like, that's whenever he's in his quote-unquote human disguise. So I'm just crossing my fingers that it pays off and that the critics don't solely compare it to Robin Williams. Because if they do that, it will not be good.
That's kind of where I'm at with that movie. First of all, he looks fucking stupid as shit. In the Entertainment Weekly cover that we saw was really, really stupid.
Yes,
and
it was.
So I don't know why that they went that route with that cover. That's the first thing that you see of him as Genie. If he's going to be CGI most of the time, why don't you put him as CGI? And I get it, it's Will Smith and you want that brand recognition on Entertainment Weekly, but that's the first thing that you see. Have these people ever been on Twitter before? That's all Twitter is them complaining about shit. So why even take that route? Because I feel like people are going to hold that against them, whether or not that's reasonable. But again, Twitter is not reasonable. So I feel like people are going to hold that against them. And I think they have with Robin Williams, him passing away a few years ago. This movie has so much working against it that I don't think that people are going to forgive that. And I don't think that critics are are going to appreciate that they remade this movie. So I am glad that Guy Ritchie didn't write this movie, because I think he has a unique style as a director, but I don't think that he's the best storyteller. So I'm definitely think that there's a possibility that this movie does well, but yeah, I think it has too much going against it for me to pick it. And again, I'm not talking about my next pick that much because I made it pretty clear that it's Hellboy, so we could just go ahead and move on to your next pick.
For sure, man. So that leaves Men in Black and New Mutants, if I'm not mistaken.
I still have Godzilla 2.
Oh,
Maybe
sorry.
we counted wrong?
No, I
that makes sense. Yeah.
I had already moved Godzilla 2 to my picks, and that's why I forgot it. So that was my next pick, is Godzilla 2. So I just saw the newest trailer for this movie attached to Bumblebee, and it was the first time I had watched it. The first trailer didn't do much for me, and the second trailer honestly didn't either. So that's why I think that it's fallen so far in the draft. But I think that everybody's in love with Millie Bobby Brown, and Vera Farmiga is also in this movie. She's an amazing actress. So, fingers crossed that they put out a quality film here, better than the Godzilla movie a couple years ago. So I am taking Godzilla.
Yeah, so I remember when the first Godzilla trailer came out, everybody was freaking out because it was so good. And it really wasn't, or it really was. And then the movie just ended up being lukewarm. I didn't think it was horrible, but yeah, it just didn't do a whole lot for me. It didn't move the needle at all. And then maybe the fact that I think all of the trailers, all the promotional material we've seen for this movie so far looks fucking awful, that maybe it'll have the opposite reaction, because that first Godzilla trailer was just fucking amazing, and then the movie was just okay. And so maybe it'll actually have the opposite reaction, everything that we've seen so far has been garbage, and then maybe this movie's actually pretty good. I'm just kind of waiting. This movie just feels like a placeholder until we can get to King Kong versus Godzilla, which apparently is already in pre-production. So hopefully this movie does all right enough to continue with that movie, because I think that's gonna be amazing. That's I think everybody, every fanboy's dream. So I'm definitely excited for that. And what's even more exciting is I get to determine what your last pick is, because depending on obviously what I pick here, and for me, I actually thought it was going to be Godzilla 2 and New Mutants were going to be the last two, but you picked Godzilla 2, obviously. So I'm going to go with Men in Black International, even though I don't like these movies at all. I think that they look a lot better, and maybe the fresh new take as far as Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson being in this movie, and it's kind of more of a reboot, I think could be interesting. I'm glad that they finally scrapped the 21 Jump Street Men in Black crossover that they were going to apparently do for years now. I think that they have officially trashed that. So I'm definitely I don't even want to say excited, because excited is too far or too strong of a word to pick for Men in Black International. I wasn't too crazy about the trailer, but when it comes to New Mutants, I'm definitely more excited for this movie.
Yeah, you picked exactly how I would have. So if it came down to me picking between those movies, I would have taken Men in Black 2, because I think that has more of an upside than New Mutants does. New Mutants is pretty much putting the the period on the X-Men 20th Century Fox sentence. So that's the last movie that 20th Century Fox is making with those characters before it goes to Marvel. And I just can't imagine when that movie comes out, anybody's going to give a shit. By the time that movie comes out, the characters will have already belonged to Marvel for a few months, and nobody's putting any emphasis into that movie at that point. Maybe Disney's putting some promo stuff together so that it is not a complete loss for them, but I just don't think there's any way that it does well. So it makes sense to me that was the last overall pick.
Yeah, I doubt they even put that much promo into it, because it's Disney, so they could lose a little bit of money. It's laughable that I say a little bit of money. They'll lose millions of dollars on this movie, but it's Disney, and they basically own the world at this point. So I'd be really surprised if we saw a ton of promo material for this movie.
For sure, man.
All right, so that's it for our 2019 Rotten Tomatoes film draft. I guess our 2018 will be hanging over us all year, because I will be doing reviews all year. That's actually a really, really good punishment. I was really nervous that I was gonna have to get like naked at any PopCon again. But I like that you kind of did something a little bit different, and it's gonna kind of hang over me all year. So it's a kind of a very cool punishment. I'm definitely looking for. Well, I wouldn't say I'm looking forward to it. I'm already dreading that stupid fucking Christian movie. That looks awful. It looks so bad. Nothing against Christians. I don't like to get super religious on the podcast, but that movie, put the religion part of it aside, that movie just looks really, really stupid. So yeah, I'm definitely dreading that one for sure. But our last segment, every episode is a nerd favorite, and I kind of teased this a little bit earlier in the episode. My nerd favorite this week, if this is your first episode, the topic changes from episode to episode. It's my turn to pick the topic, so I'm going to talk about our favorite moment from Golden Globes. So I really like the fact that they didn't just do it for her, but they did it a couple of times where the Golden Globes, even though they kind of are a little bit more crunched for time, they seem to be more like, let's get to the awards and let's kind of move this thing along. They don't do as many like stupid things with the hosts, even though they did a really stupid flu shot bit in like the middle of the show that was really stupid. But they let people talk. And I really liked, and I'm blanking on her name. I want to say Regina King.
Yeah.
She did a really, really cool speech, acceptance speech, and they tried to like play her off, and she just kept talking, and it was a really powerful speech, and it happened a couple of times. It wasn't necessarily just her speech, but they had it a couple of times where they tried to like play somebody off, and it was a really powerful moment, and they were just like, they cut the music off and just let her talk and let this person talk, and I thought that was really cool, and I like that. Like, I know a lot of people don't like that these actors and actresses get political on these shows, but like, what are you going to do? Like, you're never going to have this platform again unless you constantly win and win and win every year. So this might be the only time that she ever, or some of these people ever, get this platform. So go for it, man. And I like that. Like, that's not necessarily, I watch the show to see who wins, but it's also kind of get a little bit of personality for these people that I may not see again for a long time. So that's kind of fun for me, and I thought that was a really cool moment.
Yeah, so I'm going the exact opposite way. Well, I guess not exact opposite, but my favorite moment by far, 1,000%, was Christian Bale's acceptance speech.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So whenever we did our top 10 last week, I talked about how Vice had squeaked its way in, and I thought that it was like this really rock and roll metal movie that was just like a middle finger to the political reign of George Bush and Dick Cheney. And then later that night, Christian Bale thanks Satan for inspiring him to play the character. I thought that was so fucking funny. I thought it was hilarious. So that was my favorite moment by far, was his acceptance speech, and he was a little all over the place, but him thanking Satan for the inspiration to play Dick Cheney was fucking amazing. So that was definitely my favorite part.
Yeah, it was so like, it was so weird because he was so cavalier about it, is the word that I'm looking for. Like he was just, like you said, kind of all over the place, and then all of a sudden he just slips it in. And I thought it was going to be more, like, obviously I noticed it, and a lot of people noticed it because it was so weird, but just the way that he was so cavalier about it was very interesting. Like, he was just thanking his wife and all these other people, and all of a sudden he was like, oh yeah, thank you, Satan, and just kept like, and he quickly moved on. It was just very funny.
For sure, man.
All right, so that's it for our 223rd episode of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast. As always, I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, subscribe, rate, review us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, basically any good podcatcher you use. We're on it. Check out our website, thenerdspodcast.com. Comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where I'm currently streaming Hellblade for the next couple of streaming sessions, and then I'll move on. I haven't quite decided what I'm going to move on to, but definitely check that out as well. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. They're both at The Nerds Podcast. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Google+. Email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com, and vote for us for Podcast of the Month at podcastland.com. For Patrick Kuhn,
Tyler Hunt,
we are The Nerds You're Looking For. Take it easy, nerds.
Later, guys.